But before I say anything else, I have to ask you, you're going to need to change your background, man. You really need to look at yourself in these videos, especially this video today, because you look like you have a headdress on, with feathers coming out of your head and everything.
Oh, this one, yeah.
Yeah, that one right there. Yeah, it's kind of out there, man.
I'll sit a bit forward. Yeah. I was thinking about this adaptability of models. My thoughts around it were like, we focus quite a bit on transitioning to S4 and then transitioning to the ABC. The other part of it, and it's sort of come to light, I suppose, out of this audit. I'm looking at their models, looking at how they model stuff, their practices. They're not planning to go to S4HANA at the moment, and the ABC is just an acronym that they may not even know about yet. The thing is that they are going down a CRM path and potentially having like a dealer-facing portal, or if you like, a different set of users that will use the model. Is not really fit for purpose, I don't think, for a new audience, if you like.
Well, it's always interesting when you try to cram SAP data into a third-party configurator.
Try to relax. This will feel a little weird.
It never works well at all. So they're going to try to take their product data out of SAP and slap it in.
I haven't had that detailed discussion with them, but there's a sort of business that have dealers. They are struggling with the conversion of quotations dealers do for their products to actually coming to sales orders. And so I think part of the CRM idea or Salesforce idea is so they have visibility across that pipeline. And but I'm not too sure if that means measuring quote performance or whether they're going to go like the whole hog of the dealer use the portal to generate their quotes. But if they do go down that path and get their models there, which is a whole other story, like you say, in their current form, would they be acceptable to a different group of users who perhaps don't have the in-depth knowledge to configure stuff?
Well, typically with a third-party tool, you extract just the relevant bit. Somehow you identify them using some kind of metadata. And you have more freedom than you do downloading into a knowledge base because you're not constricted by the knowledge base format. You're constricted by whatever format you desire in your third-party tool. And then, of course, you have to map the third-party tool's format, whatever that might be. So, yeah, and then you got to map back, so it takes a black box on the way out and a black box on the way in. It's never fun. And I don't see SAP or Salesforce, for that matter, being real willing to open up their platforms to APIs from the other, because they're deep competitors in the CRM space. It'll be interesting.
Regardless of Salesforce or anything like that, I think it comes back to the previous discussions where, 10 years ago, the focus was perhaps on being able to accept an order so the back end works. It might be a bit ugly in the front end, but, we've got people that know how to find their way through configuring up the product. As time moves on, it is becoming a bit more either customer facing or being released to another group of users who don't necessarily have the technical knowledge or the skill to make some of the decisions in the model. The model should actually take them down a filtered path, in my view, and only show them what they can select and guide them as much as possible, and not let them select something and then have the configurator tell them off.
But should that guidance start at a specific spot, or should it allow the customer to start wherever they want and then guide them?
Yeah, no, good question. My My approach has been in recent times is that you open up the configuration down the path that you want people to go down. So what I mean by that, in some cases, you might only show 3 characteristics when the user comes in, and they have to select, say, a color and a size, for example. And then once they've made those 2 selections, then you open up maybe another set of characteristics, because in some ways it keeps the model simpler. And the other advantage sometimes is if you give them free form, I want to just start anywhere, it can tie the model in a knot.
Well, this is where we start talking about needs-based configuration again, you know, because what you're discussing is the traditional, I know what product I want, and that's what I'm going to start with. You know, somehow I managed to find this product.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to configure it. And my argument has always been that the finding of the product is a configuration task. That we have, it's kind of been bred out of our mindset as SAP configuration professionals over the 20 years, because SAP didn't have anything to do it. You know, I mean, it was very nasty to make that happen. But I think that's what people are expecting now.
I'm trying to free your mind, Neo, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through.
But isn't that coming partly from like a CPQ solution where you've got almost that top layer of, I've got my product catalog across here. You answer some choices and questions, and then you end up with a couple of products. You know, you select the one you need and then configure it.
See, I'm going even broader than that, because, you know, I just was looking for a new elliptical.
Yep.
Okay. And first question I had was, all right, this is 2020. I haven't shopped for an elliptical since, you know, 2003. So what are the companies that make ellipticals, and who is the best company? Okay, well, you type it into Google and you get back this long list of crap that you now have to start sorting through. I didn't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But eventually you get to this manufacturer's page. And now I want to say, okay, I want the elliptical with adjustable stride length. I want it to have a footprint of, you know, however many centimeters. I want it to have X number of workouts. You can't do that. Today you have to pick based on price point, mm-hmm. and then drill down and investigate into whatever it is you want. Very, very unfriendly user experience. And I will tell you that at least 4 manufacturers lost my business because they could not answer my questions soon enough and in an easy, friendly way. When I look at how people buy online, they either want SKUs or they want something to guide them to what people think is good.
No, it's interesting. I sort of get that. What you're saying is you almost want the super configurator across the top that gives you multiple ways in, you know, to the product. So take your elliptical, you want this feature, this feature, this feature, and you don't really care about price, whatever. And that's your first main filter. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much.
And that first main filter might bring up some subcategories, or it might bring up some SKUs. So you might, for whatever reason, you might choose a subcategory because it's the, I don't know, high-tech elliptical as opposed to a simple one. You're just interested in going down that path, and then ultimately end up at a model. I suppose the point I was coming at the moment, just in the scope of what I'm working on, just once you've got to that product that you know you're going to order or configure up, it's making that path intuitive.
Right, and we're back at the, what do I want to do with my model? Do I want to do what do I want to make today's life just a little bit easier? Or do I want to make the life of my salespeople better? And do I want to differentiate myself from the other elliptical maker over there? And in my mind, if anybody's going to go through the effort of building models, be they rebuilding them, be they building them from new, whatever, they have to think about how their salespeople sell and what, assuming there are salespeople, and if there aren't salespeople, well, how is the consumer looking? And what do I need to feed into search engines from my model that gets them to me instead of you, right? And this is where I keep coming back to, we don't think as configuration professionals, we don't think far enough in the future or far enough in the field. And I think that's a huge failure on our part, especially when I go talk to anybody in the CWG. They don't talk about any of that crap. They talk about, okay, now that I have this product, I'm going to configure it. I mean, about the only guy that does is the SSC guys, right? But even they're on the fringes of it because they want to talk about these huge solutions. I don't care about huge solutions at this point. I want to sell stuff. And nobody talks to the salesperson about how they need to sell.
And that's interesting. When I approach a model design, you've got so many stakeholders involved. You've got marketing and sales, you've got R&D, you've got production planning people, you've got finance, you've got all these people, hitting you with requirement. And so it's actually working out what is your best sources of information quite often, or what is the best presented information. And I suppose the classic is, in this case, simple color selection in their modeling approach, precondition driven. So I try and understand what's going on with these preconditions. So you start going through each color, having a look at their code, trying to just see what they're actually doing to select the color. I got part way in and said that, oh, that's a waste of time. I can't make head nor tail of this because it's just so fine detailed and you can't see the complete picture. So, okay. So then, you talk to someone and he goes, oh, well, yeah, there are some basic rules, the colors available, driven by the gauge of metal that we use to make the product. And then there's some things around where we manufacture it and things like that. And he says, I've got this chart. And
in Excel.
It was in a PDF, but effectively had this chart, and you go down and you go, oh yeah, well that fits in a nice variant table there, and this bit with some colors and plant rules that fits in another table over there. And then there's a couple of little subtle rules that may just need a small constraint or something to handle that rule without a table or whatever. But effectively, probably after a couple of hours work of creating 2 or 3 variant tables and about 5 or 6 constraints, it effectively had the same solution built that was probably 85-90% there for just on the knowledge I had. Obviously the R&D guys will go another level of detail, but all of a sudden your source of information lines up nicely with a nice set of variant tables that everyone picture and see without having to dive through 100 different preconditions or more.
And I'm all over that solution. And I think this is the base difference in what you're talking about. You're coming at it from being hired to do a very specific thing.
Yes.
Right? I'm coming at it from the aspect of what should companies be doing?
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Yeah. Well, like I say, you were hired by this company to do a very specific thing, which is basically to say, look at our models and tell me how we can improve what we got. They didn't hire you to say, how can we increase sales by 4%?
No.
And in my mind, again, that should be part of the conversation. Anytime a company is going to invest significant resources in changing, touching, rebuilding, building from scratch their VC model, because that's a significant effort to rebuild any model. Why rebuild it just to do the same thing that it does now? You should rebuild it with the intent of doing something better. you know, from increasing sales, decreasing cycle time, whatever the milestone or metric is.
No, I agree. And yeah, when I started on this work, it was probably a fairly narrow scope. They just go, you know, what's our modeling practice look like, and could we do it better? Fine, you know. And yes, you can do it better, and et cetera, et cetera. Talk about a transition path for that. To your point, I suppose, then they start talking about a CRM system, and then you start to think, oh, okay. You do start to think more broadly, because the problem is when you go audit a model and another model and another model, you're in silos.
Yeah.
And the way all the VC tools work is you are looking in silos. It's not easy to go, well, what's in this model that's in this model as well? And, you know, you can do where use lists and things like that, but it's not easy to get the helicopter view of the whole solution. And
no, it's not. And even what I used to do, I used to download the tables, you know, so I'd be downloading Con and Cabin and Kuko and things of that nature, you know, and I'd use MS Access a lot to discover trends. And that's a pretty good way of doing it, but you got to really know the background shit, the background tables and so forth, you know. And even when you do, you're only right about 85% of the time, you know, if you're lucky. But it gives you a direction, right? And it gives you a sense of how big is this issue across all these models. However, at some point in time, you have to, you know, in your case, I think you have to come back and say, yeah, your modeling practices aren't the best. And here's some things that you could do just to take what you have and make your modeling practices better. However, if you want to do more, for example, you want to go to CRM, or you want to prep yourself for S4 or blah, 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 then not only do you want to do these things, but you want to invest this effort, you know, in discussing your future state and how you're going to do things differently to drive sales. Because let's face it, if we can't drive sales, nothing else matters. My market share needs to be bigger than your market share in order for my business to grow more than your business. And at the end of the day, that's what business is all about, right? I mean, because you can't do any of the cool things like be, you know, philanthropic or socially just or anything like that unless you're successful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, I was playing with Power BI, for example, to pull out relationships and get it in a nice network diagram. So probably a little bit like what you're doing in Microsoft Access or whatever, but it is just a bit more of a visual, because I was just trying to understand how their class structure hung together with what products and what models and things like that, for example, and just get a high level view of that, just to see how they're doing stuff. But no, I agree. I think the reason why, as modelers in general, we are in our silos is that's the tools that we have, because they drive us into silos, and we don't have the tools available to do that broader thinking, or at times, you know.
Well, I agree and I disagree. You know, I agree that the tools we have are tactical in nature, and what I'm discussing is strategic in nature. However, I would also argue that very, very few people in the configurator profession, and I pick a configurator, I don't care which one, very few people think about using that configurator strategically. And to me, that's the big disconnect in what we're doing, and even what we're driving the AVC to be with SAP. You know, it's still being driven as a tactical replacement for LOVC, and people aren't thinking about how could I make this a strategic tool to increase market share.
You got the gift, but it looks like you're waiting for something.
What?
Your next life, maybe. Who knows? That's the way these things go. What's funny?
Because you can. You just have to think differently. But having said all that nice, wonderful stuff, you know, I like your conversation about trying to figure out the class structure. It fits in very well with the presentation I did a few years back about, you know, what's the best type of class structure to use. Is it a class for every, you know, unique class for every material? Is it a logic module? Is it a class hierarchy? What is it? And, you know, even though I landed on class hierarchy, then logic module, then a couple other things, there's a lot of argument that it should be logic module first and class hierarchy second. And there's some very good arguments to that. It comes back to one of your statements you always make about plug and play.
Yeah. No, I think so, and that's where it's always in the back of my mind, and I mention it a lot when I talk about modeling. Is because the way my mind works, it's all about grouping stuff, whether it's a class structure or a class hierarchy, whether it's, you know, what does your bomb structure look like? Again, it's just grouping components effectively. Routings is, well,
Routings suck.
Well, you're mapping to
they have no good tool for routings in SAP. Sorry.
No, but normally you're mapping into a you know, a fairly defined process, often, not always in routings. But so everything is about grouping things. Like constraint nets are about grouping. Procedures can drive me nuts because you can group stuff in a procedure, but they can get pretty unwieldy. Like,
yeah,
you know, I'm looking at some that are over 500 lines. In your experience, you've probably had some that are a lot bigger than that too. And
we had some models. I think the worst one that I remember was over 1,400 lines of code.
Yeah,
it's like, guys, you don't get it. I mean, first off, you don't need to have this. Second off, it is a performance killer. And third, there's no way that you can realistically safely change anything about this procedure. There's too much wrapped up into it, you know.
Yeah, so you know where I'm coming from on some of that. So but
the thinking behind it, Phil, just to finish this off, the thinking behind it was that, you know, if we did things parametrically, we'd only need one thing, we'd only have one group, and everything could feed off that group. And that's just, I'm sorry, it's a great concept, but in reality and practical application, it sucks.
Good point. It's food for thought. I think you work in the weeds, you know, trying to make your models better, make them more user friendly, and things like that. There is that bigger picture that people need to drive. Often that has to come from the right levels of management, I suppose, to have that vision.
And they don't understand. They don't have a clue. But it's like anything else, you know, be it business, be it military. I mean, strategy comes before tactics. You know, when you lose the war militarily, it's because of one of two reasons. Either you put tactics in front of strategy, or you ignored logistics. And that's the second piece about modeling is logistics. And from a logistical standpoint, I'm more speaking about the people that are involved in developing your model, not just in the VC world, but in the sales world, the marketing world, the art, all of those peripheral areas. Because if they don't understand the strategic direction and a little bit about what the configurator can do, they will drive you down a tactical road that suits them and nobody else.
No, it was good. It gave me a bit to think about, particularly because they are going more customer facing, and yeah, there's probably some considerations that whatever they do with their models need to be considered in a broader context than what they do now.
Well, you know, on a positive note, I saw we're at 104 subscribers.
Yeah.
So I don't know if, you know, you just went around to all your neighbors and said, hey, subscribe to this channel for me, would you?
No, it didn't.
Right. And the reason I bring that up is because apparently somebody thinks what we're talking about is somewhat useful. You know, at least 100 people out of 104 must think we're somewhat useful. And something, I got some kind of notification about some comment that I haven't gotten out to read yet.
Okay.
But, you know, we need more of that, more comments to help drive us to figure out what we're going to talk about.